Today's subject is the cost of staying the same. Your fees are never an expensive number. The client is just comparing the wrong number. And your job is to change the number to compare it to. So look, let's recap what we covered. 3 weeks ago, Mike covered about raising your standards, and mastering your state. We talked about no longer selling and what to do instead, changing how your clients think. And this week is about that pays off in money. You change one number in the client, the one number the client uses to judge your fee. Right. Every time a client tells you this, oh, your fees are too high, they're comparing it to one of two numbers. And both of them are wrong. And that's what we're going to fix today. When a client says your fee's too high, they're measuring it against the cost of doing nothing or a cheaper agency elsewhere. So when a client says your fees are too high, I'm going to repeat that. They're measuring it against two things: the cost of doing nothing, or the cheapest agency, i.e., going elsewhere. And if you're in that situation, most recruiters lose on both. They either let the client believe that doing nothing is free, or they sit there defending the fee against some recruiter that's cheaper. But if you're doing that, it's a losing game. Just to recap, guys, if you can turn your mics off, please. A few of you got your mics off. You can turn your mics off. I think it's Steph. You can turn your mic off. Yeah, apologies for that. You'll never, ever win by trying to defend your number. You will win by changing the number they compare it to. The expensive thing is not your fee. The expensive thing is the wrong outcome. That job all going unfulfilled and the whole job and what that's costing the business. When a client pushes back on your fee, so in the last month, when a client pushed back on your fee, which number were they really comparing it to? Doing nothing or a cheaper agency? Because the move is different for each one. So the whole idea of this is one idea, two leaks. The cost of staying the same is always bigger than your fee, whether the client's doing nothing or buying cheap. See, you're not in the business of filling roles. You're in the business of stopping leaks. And there are two leaks. The leak, one is the vacancy, the empty seat. And leak two is the cheap gamble. And often the hiring manager's got those two options. Same principle in these both. But let's start with, do you know what, Mike? What you say is true, and we do need to find an executive for this role. But let me just think about it. And when I'm saying that, I want you to think of a dripping tap. One drip is nothing. You walk past it. You do not call the plumber for one drip. So it keeps dripping day after day after day. And the bill at the end of the quarter, it's enormous. And a vacancy is exactly like that. Each day, it looks survivable. The team covers, the manager picks up the slack, deal sits through, but nobody panics. No single day feels like a crisis, so nobody fixes it. That's the trap. Your fee is the plumber's invoice. It looks like a cost, but it's actually stopping that leak. Now, the second leak, and the one that most recruiters lose out onto, when the client says, oh, Don, that's great, but you're a lot more expensive than the agency down the road. And then if you then try and defend that, you're agreeing that you're comparing like for like. But you're not selling the same thing because the cheapest should win. The client is being completely rational if it's exactly the same thing, but it often isn't. So the guidance to you is refuse to do that comparison. What you want to do is break the idea that you and the cheap agency are selling the same thing, because you're not. A cheap contingent recruiter working on that role with 5 other recruiters is being paid to be fast, not to be right. They send volume CVs, resumes through and hope that one of them sticks. They carry no risk when it fails. You work it exclusively and you're accountable for who actually gets fired. Fee level buys behavior. A low contingent fee buys a race to send the quickest CV or stroke resume. a higher retained fee buys focus, exclusivity. If it's retained, you're going to do the research to find those candidates that are not actually looking for the next role, but would probably respond favourably to a phone call from a headhunter. And most importantly, the client is working with a recruiter who's got some risks involved in getting this right. The client is not choosing between fees, they're choosing between results and chance. I want to repeat that. The client is not choosing between fees, they are choosing between results and chance. I'm going to give you a practical example. About 18 months ago, I went to get a new car, and the dealership were keen to talk to me about buying an EV, and I had no intention of buying one. Nothing. Why would I do that? I then started complaining about, I've heard all about, what they call it? Sorry, just a mental block. You have this fear that you won't have enough charge in your battery to get home. There's a proper name for it, but I can't think what it is now. And he said, but you're comparing a petrol for an EV. It isn't the same. I said, yes, it is. He said, no. He said, think about it. Whatever car you drive, most of the time, you're not in the car. Most of the time, you're not driving it. So you've got plenty of time to charge it. He said, but people aren't comparing like for like. And I thought, that's a fair point, actually. Eventually, I ended up buying an electric vehicle, though I had no intention at the time. But what he did is he got me to stop comparing a like for like. An EV with a petrol isn't a like for like. And you don't make the comparison. A cheaper recruiter to you isn't a like for like. So, and I want to share with you how to sort of make the cost real. The cost of I'm going to use the term empty seat, or the cost of the vacancy. What does that person produce or protect? Put a weekly number on that. Lost billings, their manager doing two jobs, the project not moving. I mentioned before I worked in IT, so recruiting. So I would talk to the IT director about the impact of this project, not having the right team in place to ensure these IT projects are delivered on time to budget. The cost of the wrong hire. The fee gap between you and the cheaper agency is probably not a great deal of money in the scheme of things, but a bad hire costs 3 times the salary to unwind, plus the lost time because you've got to start all over again. These are the questions you should be asking the hiring manager. What's the cost of a failed, cheap process? If a cheap gamble does not work, that weekly leak keeps running while they start from zero. The saving on the fee evaporates in a fortnight because they went for the cheapest. Then get them to talk about the numbers out loud. So what's it costing you per week for this vacancy being open? What's the downside of the wrong hire? What if you do hire with one of the cheaper recruiters, so you get the CV or resume really quick, but it doesn't work out because you went for speed rather than quality? Almost every single time, your fee is smaller than the number in terms of in that room. I want you to do something now. Think of one live role on your desk right now. Do you actually know what it's cost that client every week it stays empty? Do you know how much it's costing that client every week it stays empty? If you don't know, would it be worth asking that question the next job order you pick up? Some of you here, Mike and Don, I know you will. You remember a lady we used to work with called Jenny in the UK. So we worked with her, 4 or 5 years ago. Good operator. Well, 2 stories about Jenny. Before she joined us, she sent out an email. This is I think it was just after COVID, in fact, saying that she would undercut any other recruiter out there. One of the reasons she joined us, because she sent out this email to her list of prospects saying she will undercut any recruiter out there. And I think 2 hiring managers came back and said, if you're operating purely on price, I don't want nothing to do with you. And that forced her to contact us because she said, I don't know what to do. I thought everybody bought on price, but they don't. But she learned the lesson that people don't buy on price. But she shared a story with us. She had this brilliant candidate for a finance role at a family-run manufacturing company. I think their turnover was about 4 million. But the client stalled and kept saying to Jenna, we're not in a rush. Let's see who else is coming through. And then out of the blue, she got a text message saying, Jenny, another agency's quoted us half your fee, so we're leaning that way. And Jenny sent me a message the next day saying, I don't know what to do, Terry. I thought people don't buy on price. Because my reaction now is to drop my fees down to 15% and beg for this business. But I said, look, let's talk it through and do these two things in order. First, refuse to be compared to the other person, to the other recruiter. She did not defend her fee at all. She simply said, you're right. I am not the cheapest. And if this other recruiter puts the same candidate through for the role, then you must use them. But I'm curious, how many agencies are working on this role and trying to fill it? And it turned out there were 4 other companies working on it. Contingent, no exclusivity. And then Jenny said, so they're being paid to be fast, not right. Have I got that right? And they goes, well, no, not right. She goes, but whoever gets the CVs to you the quickest is who you're going to go with. And they went, well, yeah, I guess so. She goes, well, it's speed then, rather than anything else. So they're going to send you a stack of CVs and hope that one sticks. But here's the thing. If you qualify, and note that language, by the way, if you qualify to work with me, it will be exclusively. I will not share the top candidates with your direct competitors. And I am accountable for who you hire. See what she's doing? She's not comparing the two fees. She's comparing a chance and the result. And then Jenny asked this question. In this finance role that is empty, who's doing the finance role right now while this role is empty? And it turned out the finance director was doing 2 jobs, some days working until 9 o'clock, and already created 2 errors that slipped through the last quarter. What Jenny did, she did the maths on the call out loud. She did, your finance director was about 110,000 and spending half his week below his pay grade. That's about 800 a week of his time wasted. That's more than $2,000 a month. Just let that sink in. And the client went quiet. And the client just said this, Jenny, how soon can you help us fill this role? And she won it on the retained. The client went from, I think it was 15% to 22%. Jenny found the candidate in 3 weeks and the offer was made within 6. But she didn't compete on price. She didn't win on the fee. She didn't defend her fee once. She won because she refused to be compared like for like. And then she made the cost of getting it wrong greater than the cost of not working with her. Truth about all this, you're not losing on fee. You're losing because you let the client compare you to the wrong number and you've never challenged it or corrected it. You let doing nothing look like free, or you sat there justifying your fee against somebody who's cheaper than you, which just confirmed you were both saying the same thing. Because the moment you start doing that, you're acknowledging, you're saying at some level, yeah, we're the same, but we're just a bit more expensive. The client who feels the real cost, who understands you're not the same as a cheap agency, doesn't haggle. They just ask you to move faster. So here's a challenge for you. If you can't put a number on what that vacancy is costing the client, and if you cannot say in one sentence why you're not the same as any other, as a cheaper recruiter, then you're a commodity and you're going to lose out on price. And again, I want to repeat this. If you cannot put a number on what that vacancy is costing the client, and you cannot say in one sentence why you're not the same as all the cheaper recruiters out there, then you become a commodity and you're going to lose out purely on price. So I want you to make a note of this challenge. On your next role or job order that you get, do not send out a single CV/resume until you've done 2 things. 1, work out or establish the weekly cost of that vacancy. This is an important bit, and get the client to admit it out loud. And so they understand that you're not saying the same thing as a cheap option. In the current roles you've got right now, your clients right now, how many of your clients actually understand the cost of filling this role incorrectly? because it's your job to make them understand that. And the way that you get them to understand it, and we talked about this last Thursday, it's about the questions that you ask. This week, going forward, stop defending your fee. When the fee comes up as a comparison, you change the number they're comparing it against. If they're comparing you to nothing, well, we're going to sit on this for a couple of weeks, couple of months. You make that look really expensive. How much will it cost if you don't fill this for another 3 months? Example, what's the typical notice period that these candidates are on? Oh, they're probably in about a month. Yeah, that's right. So even if you make an offer today, they can't join you until the third week of July. Is that right? Well, yeah. Can you afford to wait that long? What impact's going to have on you? So they join the third week of July. They probably won't hit the ground running until the middle of August. Can you afford that? They're the questions that you need to be asking. My fee is never the cost. The wrong outcome is. That's where the cost is. My fee is just the investment. You get this wrong, that's where the cost is. Well, I repeat, the best recruiters never argue about fee. They change what the client is measuring against. So look, as we wrap up, here's my message to you. Stop defending your fee. Change the number that they're comparing it to. Make the wrong outcome the only expensive thing in the room. Because that's all that matters. And the moment you're going to do that, you're going to get less resistance to your fee. Until next time, folks, take care, take action, be relentless, folks.